The Battle of Long Island, 1776. George Washington, expecting the next British move to be against New York, moves his army there. Washington is heavily conflicted due to terrain constraints around the island of Manhattan. The Americans could not hope to hold the various waterways that encircle Manhattan. One of Washington's informants and generals deems that the city is undefendable due to the Americans' inability to challenge the Royal Navy. Washington has around 18,000 men at his disposal to defend the city. This is one of the largest forces raised during the entire war. His men are enthusiastic, but are poorly trained. They lack discipline, which would be a constant hamper on Washington's efforts. Washington, not knowing where the British will strike, and needing to hold all waterways to protect the city and not allow his forces to be encircled and destroyed, splits his forces, defending Long Island around the Brooklyn Heights, the city of New York itself, and several forts and batteries along the Hudson and East Rivers. This leaves his forces unable to easily support each other, and leaves Washington's forces smaller against a more concentrated attack. By late June, British forces arrive outside New York with the fleet totaling around 400 ships, one of the largest naval task forces assembled before the World Wars. General William Howe commands a total of 30,000 troops, much larger than the American force, and quickly occupies the undefended Staten Island, which he will use as a staging ground for the rest of the campaign. From here, he attempts to make Washington surrender through a series of negotiations. Washington refuses, and the British prepare to attack American positions around Long Island. They'll make their landfall on August 27th unopposed. Washington, with poor intelligence, believing that he's only facing a fraction of the British force, elects not to fully reinforce his positions, meaning the British will be attacking an understrength element of Washington's army. The battle begins. Howe has devised a plan. He will have two forces assault and distract the main American line to put at Gotham Heights, while a third, much larger force will flank through the undefended and seemingly undetected Jamaica Pass on the American flank, and hopefully envelop and destroy a majority of Washington's army. The battle begins when British forces under General Grant engages one of the American forces under General Lord Sterling. Another Hessian force also begins the bombardment and skirmishes with American General Sullivan. The engagement between General Lord Sterling and General Grant becomes one of the bloodiest and some of the most intense fighting in the battle. American forces manage to secure an important hill and also inflict heavy losses on the main British force, increasing confidence among the American lines. Meanwhile, Washington, who has arrived from New York, oversees the battle from his positions in Brooklyn. The third British force successfully navigates the pass and completely flanks American forces. They attack the hill that General Sullivan's men are stationed on. General Sullivan fights desperately on two sides as the Hessians finally launch their main assault. Sullivan manages to actually allow most of his men to escape the encirclement, but is captured as a result. The British now have a complete opportunity to encircle and destroy 1,600 men under General Lord Sterling. Sterling, now at the crux of the battle, begins and makes a desperate choice. Taking about 270 Marylanders, some of the best troops in the army, he fixes bayonets and leads personally several countercharges against the entire British force, which is roughly around 8,000 men. While the American army manages to successfully escape the British trap, the Marylanders are wiped off the face of the earth, and General Sterling is captured. The Americans are now trapped in Brooklyn, as the Royal Navy has also infiltrated the East River. Washington now faces a moment of almost inevitable destruction. Washington. Now, as night falls, Washington finds himself surrounded. British forces slowly dig trenches towards his position. Washington elects to attempt a risky, but desperate, naval evacuation of all of his forces back to New York. Over the night, forces are slowly evacuated from the island, while Washington leaves a small rearguard to keep the British convinced that he is still holding his position. Disaster nearly strikes when this rearguard is misinformed about the orders and retreats to the beaches, leaving their defenses open, and the British have an opportunity to successfully attack Washington while he's unprepared. Luckily, the British are unaware of the American mistake, and American forces quickly return to their positions. The evacuation is slow, however, with his men being extremely careful not to lose equipment or any lives. As dusk is about to emerge and the Royal Navy will soon be aware of his efforts, a fog miraculously settles over the East River. Washington, by some miracle, is able to evacuate his whole force, not losing a single piece of equipment or life. Washington has managed to pull off one of the greatest feats in military history by successfully removing his force in the face of his superior army and navy. While the Battle of Brooklyn/Long Island is seen as a massive American tactical defeat, the fact that Washington was able to save his army and fight for another day kept the American cause alive and proved Washington's ability as a commander rather than a strategic mind. This was the Know Nothing Podcast. Thank you.